E
Então,
tem um colega seu com quem eu colaboro há muitos anos, que é o Leandro, né?
sim, claro, claro, exato.
Leandro
Leandro.
é colaborador de longa data.
Eu acho que nós nos encontramos num congresso no Nordeste, tá? Aí eu fiquei conversando com você e com o Leandro. Agora, eu não sei se foi Natal, alguma coisa assim.
Pode ter sido Natal, mas eu lembro de a gente ter conversado, mas eu não lembro aonde, e faz
Listo,
tempo.
profesor.
E também no CBPF, na defesa de tese de alguém, agora eu também não me lembro.
Uhum.
Listo, profesor Isaías, ya se puede iniciar.
Obrigado, Ximena. Então, vamos começar. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Today we have a pleasure to announce the invited speaker, Professor Caio Lewenkop. Caio Lewenkop is professor from Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He has a large curriculum, more than 120 papers published in very good journals. And today he will talk for us beyond the translation symmetry, strongly disorderly and amorphous topological insulators. Caio, uh,
Yeah,
Caio?
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
here.
you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let me first thank Isaias for the kind invitation to give this talk. And I see that some of you guys are waking up very early to attend it due to the time lapse here between different regions of Latin America. And thank you for the attention and the interest. So the subject of today's talk is a line of research I'm pursuing for a number of years with different emphasis and has to do with topological insulators. And the main question I was asking myself many years ago, I and many other people, is that there is this claim that there are these materials, which are these topological insulators, that have these remarkable properties of being insulating in the bulk and conducting in the surface. And the surface states are robust against different kinds of disorder, very robust surface states. And this is a topological result based on band structure. So I'll be speaking about band topology. And I was asking myself about, what does robust means? And so this started a long collaboration, a long stream of papers where we explore different kinds of disorder to understand better, the microscopic picture of these topological insulators. So this is basically the introduction, and I will go through many aspects of this investigation throughout the talk, but let me start with the basics. So the basics is, oops, yeah, the basics is the prelude is the integer quantum Hall effect. And so the integer quantum Hall effect is the very first manifestation of, let's say, topology in electronic transport. And the whole idea is that basically, if you measure the resistivity of a material, resistance, the transversal and the longitudinal, and what you see in 2D materials under very strong magnetic fields is that instead of following, for instance, the predicted constant resistivity in Ohm's law, or Drude's law, sorry, as you increase the magnetic field, you develop these very strange peaks they are quantized in some units. And here, there is zero resistance. On the other hand, the transversal one, the Drude prediction is a straight line, and you see these wonderful plateaus, which are quantized to a level which is now metrology, is the standard of current and charge, etc. So corresponding to a plateau, there is in the longitudinal, there is zero resistivity in the transversal. So This is a very remarkable behavior. And what's more remarkable, it doesn't depend on geometry, doesn't depend on the material once you have a 2D material. It has, as soon as you reach very low temperatures, it doesn't depend on temperature, is a quite to a daring statement is kind of universal in its standard of the ohm of the unit. It's a metrological. So the very first, let's say, explanation for that, and it's due to a number of people, but basically it's related to the quantum Hall effect. This is something that we study in quantum mechanics books. And basically in 2D, if you have a very strong magnetic field, then you have quantized levels which are extremely degenerate. Now, if you consider also the border of the system, let's say the system has an edge, then these bands here, they have to bend. They have to be distorted to confine the electrons. And basically, depending on your Fermi energy, you have a discrete number of bands here, an integer number of bands. And these are the channels where you can conduct. And this is, for instance, will correspond to the fourth Landau level, to quantization of four channels, four moving in one direction and four moving in the opposite direction. This is a chiral behavior. And you can identify it with one of these plateaus. So this is the integer quantum Hall effect in this picture. Now, then come the two first heroes of our talk. And one is David Thouless, who won the Nobel Prize, and Michael Berry, who, well, has enormous contributions to the field. And basically, Thouless understood the following. So the standard theory for conductance is based on the Kubo formula. And it has to be unified. You know, like if you have a system which is not strongly interacting, you are close to zero bias, linear response, you have to explain this using the Kubo formula, explain the transport properties. And basically, he was very, let's say, dissatisfied with this explanation of the quantum Hall based on bands and crossings, etc. So he set up a program to compute the conductance or the conductivity, sorry, of this Landau level of integer quantum Hall effect based on the Kubo formula. And in 82, he derived this amazing result that basically the conductivity is quantized. And he described the experiments, and he could prove that based on some integral over the bands that he identified as an integer number. So the connection to topology was made a little bit later when Michael Berry wrote this wonderful paper about what is now known as Berry phase, Berry curvature, etc., in 84, where he considered basically a system which is slowly distorted in a parameter space. And you consider basically a circle over this parameter space. And he could show that basically the solution will generate some physics that have to do with what is called the Berry curvature or the Berry tensor, if you want. And people identify that as a manifestation of topology. And this quantity here, which I depicted here, which is the solution of this equation, the Schrödinger equation, where the Hamiltonian is a function of this parameter space psi, which is generic, will end up giving you some quantization in this funny space. Now, this funny space can be the reciprocal space. And so you can make connections to whatever David Thouless and co-workers have computed. So the amazing coincidence, not coincidence, the amazing result is that Michael Berry was thinking about very different systems, that are adiabatically changed in time. And he ended up with a formula that if you read the Michaels-Berry formula and if you read this TK and N formula, they are exactly the same. So there is some profound connection between these two approaches. And people have worked out these connections over the years. And now we understand that if the bands in the band structure fulfill certain conditions, then there is some invariant, which is a topological invariant, that could eventually be related to transport properties. And this was the beginning of this new field. So these two guys met. They are, records of that. They discussed and they identify a number of common interests. And eventually, although these two works were done very separately, these connections were made. Good. So the second big hero of the talk is Doug Haldane, who also won the Nobel Prize, shared with David Thewlis and another person. And basically, he wrote this seminal paper in '88 that he was wondering, well, people have shown the integer quantum Hall effect as a manifestation of a magnetic field. Can we come up with a model or with some Hamiltonian that doesn't have the magnetic field and will show the same topological properties or the same physics as the integer quantum Hall? And so Haldane in '88 wrote this PRL, it's a long time ago, where he started with this Hamiltonian, which was describing electrons in a honeycomb lattice jumping around. And well, this is known as nowadays as graphene. This was much earlier than graphene was synthesized, but this was for him an interesting toy model based on previous studies of other people. And then he put a mass term to create, let's say, a gap. And because you need a gap in these systems, which, the quantum Hall has these gaps, the integer, the Landau levels. And then he introduced a magic term that electron will jump in this funny next to nearest neighbors. This hopping here contains a phase and will do something amazing to the system. And this is basically, he solved this model and he figured out this is a topological model, nowadays called as Chern insulator. And he recovered the main results of the integer quantum Hall effect. And this is why this paper is called integer quantum Hall effect without magnetic field, but with this funny term. So in retrospect, if you open this very important paper, he is not very happy only with computing this quantum Hall effect, but he also tried to understand the phase diagram in terms of this the mass parameter and this hopping between nearest neighbors and this phase phi. Remind you that this phase phi and this T2 are the essential new ingredients where all this magic appears, where this topology appears. And he came up with this phase diagram where depending on the values of this ratio and phi, you have regions which are colored that are topological, where you have protection, where you have quantized transport, etc. And you have regions in this parameter space where the C1 is 0 and the system is trivial, is a trivial insulator. And basically, these lines here between these two regions correspond to parameters where the gap closes. So he basically says, well, you might have a topological to trivial quantum phase transition if the gap closes. This is a requirement. So if there is no gap closing, then you don't have this transition. And these are the results that are in this beautiful PRL. And this paper basically received very little attention at the time because there was no actual physical system to realize this kind of beautiful physics. So, and if you read the very last sentence or one of the last paragraphs of the system of this paper, sorry, Haldane actually wrote, well, while this particular model presented here is unlikely to be directly physical realizable, so he was very pessimistic about, well, you can put the quantum Hall effect in a wider context, an association than just broken time reversal symmetry and topology, etc., etc. So that was Haldane's paper then. Okay, so the paper is beautiful, but he could not be more wrong about the first well, the green is fine, but the red is wrong. So and being wrong in the red made this paper really famous. Okay. So in 2005, almost 20 years after Haldane wrote his paper, Kane and Malley came up with a model to describe basically a spin orbit coupling in graphene. So remind you that some important things have to happen before this paper was written. So people have to discover graphene. So this was 2004. And then these guys knowing about Haldane's paper, they understood that if you have two copies of Haldane Hamiltonian, they could map Haldane Hamiltonian into a spin orbit coupling. And then instead of having just the chiral current that I mentioned to you before, where the electrons in the quantum Hall effect will move, let's say, clockwise or anti-clockwise, say from here and at the other edge here, these are the blues or the reds. In graphene, you don't need this very strong magnetic field to do the magic. You just need the spin-orbit interaction. And then you have edge states, which are protected and robust, that have this very nice structure, like they have this helicity. And there is what we call spin momentum locking, which is key to understand this phenomena. So electrons moving one direction, they have spin up, for instance. Electrons moving the other direction, they have spin down. And this happens in this edge, and the other edge is reversed. So this spin texture is very important to explain the microscopic nature of topological protection. Okay, so this is basically the introduction to the field without math. And so if I want to explain that in terms of some external deformation parameter, so basically I have an insulator, then I change some parameter if I could of my system, like doping or a disorder or something else. And then I drive my system from a normal insulator to a topological insulator just by, let's say, some external parameter that, and there is some topological phase transition. So this is, let's say, artistic view of the phase diagram that Haldane drove to us, Haldane produced to us. Okay, so and this changes the. So the question is, what could be this external parameter? Okay, so this is basically what we want to address in this talk. And what does the magic is the spin orbit coupling. Okay, so these topological insulators, and I'm sticking just to band topology. They basically they are 1D, 2D, etc., etc. I'll stick to 2D and 3D just to explain to you. In 2D, actually, this protected states, they are edge states. So there are this bulk edge duality. You have these nice states here. And the hallmark of that is that you have a Dirac cone and these bands here that cross the gap, they are the topological gap, they are edge states. In 3D, the situation is much more complicated, but instead of having an edge state, you have a surface state. Not necessarily the electrons will move in straight lines, but they will have this nice spin structure. And people have done a lot of experiments basically in spectroscopy and looking at these Dirac cones and testing the spin texture of these systems. So I'll focus my talk more on this 2D, but I'll mention briefly some 3D as well. Good. So the first experiment to show that these objects are not just a product of our imagination is this famous science paper of 2007 by the Molenkamp group. And basically, they were investigating some, let's say, quantum wells made of mercury telluride. And depending on the width of these wells, you might reach a situation that you have a topological insulator. And then they measured this for different kind of systems. And basically, if you reach this condition where you have the right width of your well, then you expect to see quantized conductance, because this is a 2D experiment, it's not conductivity. And this is what they see. They see this plateau here around this expected value of 2e squared over h. The 2 is for the spin degeneracy, and eventually, depending on the V gate, this disappears. Now, the first feature I want to point out is that if you look here, this experiment shows that, so in distinction to the integer quantum Hall effect, where the conductance or the resistance is a standard for metrology, here you see things which are close to a quantization, but it's never perfect. And this is, it's a little bit frustrating. So people were trying to look at this over the years to improve, and with limited success. So that means that probably these robust states are not as robust as people claim, but the effect is sort of there. So these quantum wells are not the only system. There are other material platforms, and this is a nice result by the group of Pablo Jarillo Ejero. For us Brazilians, it's hard to pronunciate Jarillo Ejero because it's, but I'm doing my best. And this science paper, he measures the same effect in TMDs. And in this case, you see, it's a noisy line, but the quantization is there. And there are some features about observing this effect in short systems, and in large systems, it's gone. So it means that if you have a large system, this robustness is probably not good, not working well. And so just to review the mechanisms, to explain that, there are hundreds of theoretical papers. And one is, like you have this spin texture. And so if you don't flip spin, there are limited options. So if you go in one direction here and you want to backscatter, you have to flip the spin. Unless you have a way to not flip the spin and go from one side of your system to the other. The problem is that these systems are relatively large, and since the wave function here is a edge state, it falls exponentially, and so there is very little, let's say, phase space available for such a process. You have to think about mechanisms. And one of this that we have explored in the past is percolation, and I won't have time to speak about it, but we are sinners in this as well. Then there is a whole bunch of mechanisms where I won't go into the detail. If you are interested, I'm very happy to answer. but there are mechanisms that you have spin flip, and so you can backscatter, and this will be detrimental to a quantized conductance, right? So I just want to flash this paper we wrote 2 years ago, because this guy is a good collaborator of mine, good friend, and he's at the same place as Isaias. So we wrote this very nice paper about a mechanism that explores the fact that if you have one of the systems with rough edges, then which is typical in TMDs, and then localization plus electron interaction it gives rise to Stoner instability, and you have a local magnetic moments. So it's not an intrinsic magnetic disorder. It's just a magnetic disorder, which is indirectly, let's say, generated by disorder. So this is a funny mechanism. And so we wrote this paper, and we were able to explain that if you have a sufficiently long system, there will be states which are sufficiently localized, and they will play the role of a local magnetic moment and flip the spin, and you have backscattering. So this is our take on a mechanism for at least TMDs. I'm very proud of this paper. Leandro has worked very hard on that. So it's based on non-equilibrium Green's functions, and it's self-consistent. So this is the hard part. So we developed over the years a lot of, let's say, technology on transport codes based on non-equilibrium Green's functions. So we have, many papers on that. But Leandro improved that, making it the possibility of including electron-electron interaction in mean field, at least, and solving this non-equilibrium Green's function self-consistently. And this is a very nice development that allowed this stuff. So if you have any ideas about systems that require transport problems that require, let's say, non-equilibrium Green's functions, Leandro is the guy to ask. And in particular, what very few people have is this tool to make it self-consistently mean field. Good. So now let's go to strong disorder. So I reached more than half of my talk, and now I'm presenting some of these results. So I better be fast. And the idea is the following. So I already told you that there is this topological invariant, which is an integral over some region of, let's say, in Brillouin, in reciprocal space, this will be an integral over the Brillouin zone, the first Brillouin zone of some object, which typically is this Berry curvature. Okay, good. So the idea is that if you have a strong disorder, there is an absence of translation invariant, and it doesn't make sense to speak about Brillouin zone. So all the standard, let's say, indicators of topological invariance, they are actually a nuisance when you have strong disorder. If you have a weak disorder, we'll say, okay, so disorder is a perturbation, and then I'll start from there. But this is not what topology tells us. Topology makes a very strong statement saying that these states are protected no matter what. But then there is the disconnect because there is no Brillouin zone. And that's the thing that bothered me and has been bothering me for years. And these are the studies that touch into that. So, and then I came across this very nice paper several years ago, where actually these guys were asking the very same question. So they built a model which is very similar to the Haldane model locally, right? But instead of having, let's say, a honeycomb lattice, they consider a random lattice. And they basically say, well, electrons will jump from one lattice side to the other with exponentially suppressed, let's say, matrix element. but there will be some connectivity. And so they made a numerical study and showed that under certain conditions, even this random lattice will exhibit quantized conductance, will exhibit this gap and localized states. So well, we first didn't believe, so we actually reproduced these results, and it's correct. And it's amazing because here you don't have, certainly with a random lattice, you shouldn't really think about reciprocal space. And this is what we were heading. Now, a random lattice is not an amorphous system. So my only disagreement with this paper is the title. Because an amorphous system, it has short range order, but it loses long range order. A random lattice is a Boltzmann gas in this language. It has no correlations, no short range, neither long range. And so this is very hard to realize in nature because, you have even an amorphous system, you know more or less where your nearest neighbor is. So, and so we focus on this stuff to write our first papers on that. So, this is what I wanted to say. Amorphous system, there is a long literature, 100 years old. People were modeling glasses, sorry, and it had a real reborn in when people were looking at amorphous germanium silicon semiconductors, and these guys were important at that time for solar cells, and so there is a vast literature on that. And basically, if you look at, let's say, I'll take one example, silica here, and look at the radial distribution function, what you see, if it will be regular, then you have very sharp peaks here, like delta functions. But the experiment shows that the peaks are enlarged, and eventually, you know where the first neighbors are, the second, the third, but eventually everything falls in the background, and you lose the long range order, and you don't know where the neighbors are if you increase the distance, the radial distance. So this was a paper 60 years ago. There was Nature then, where people understood more or less, would explain the structure of amorphous systems. And there were lots of simulations with up to 1,000 atoms and blah, 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 all classical. Now we have a different problem because it's quantum, and we have to do a quantum simulation. And with 1,000 atoms, this becomes more difficult unless you have some empirical forces. So this is the goal. So if you have a crystal and you look at the radial distribution function, this is a glass, and this is a gas. So you know the first neighbors and you don't know the next. In a 2D system, basically what you have is something like that. And due to the, like a solid angle or whatever. So here you have a growth which goes like R2, and here it goes like R. And so this was our first paper on that. So we tried to identify a real material which was a good candidate for a 2D topological insulator. And actually, this was one of this first to be synthesized, bismuthine. This is a science almost 10 years ago. And these guys, they basically had a hard time to make this crystal significantly large and get rid of all imperfections. And they show this guy is a quantum spin Hall or a topological insulator, this bismuthine. Now, the idea is the following. So if this guy is a topological insulator, what happens if we take an amorphous bismuthine? Does it survive the amorphization process? I mean, does the topological phase survive it? And then we can propose an experiment. So look, you go to the experiment and say, look, instead of annealing for 2 or 3 weeks, just anneal just a little, and you have a amorphous system, and check it out, what is going on. So the synthesis is much cheaper, and eventually you get this stuff. So unfortunately, these guys moved to a different problem, and we haven't have much of response from other experimental colleagues, but at least we raised some attention for our theoretical colleagues. And we wrote these two papers here, basically. We produced in the computer an amorphous bismuthine, and there are different ways to do that. And we do a DFT calculation to relax the structures. We do a DFT calculations to compute the transport using Landauer or non-equilibrium Green's function for that. And basically, I don't want to enter into details, but this is in these papers, how we do the amorphization, we anneal, and we do we follow some recipes in the literature. And this would be the pristine system. And the amorphous, as I said before, you have the first peak, you know where the first neighbor is from some point, then the second, and long range, you don't know anything else. And we compute the conductance, and we have perfect conductance, and it's stable. And there are several small details which are worth discussing, but not in this talk. So this was our contribution as a proposal for the experimentalist. Now, what is, from my point of view, what is interesting is that I will pick up on a sentence that you find in Haldane's paper. If you have a phase transition from topological to normal, you need to close the gap, right? So you have a gapped system. It's topological, it's protected. You have to close it before you do something else. And so we were monitoring the band gap, and as a function of this amorphization step for all the systems that we generated, and basically it suffers a little bit, but it never closes. So and then we came up with this idea that people from the DFT hate. We say, well, the one that is responsible for all the magic is the spin-orbit coupling, which in bismuthine is large. Let's say we have a different material, and we play with this spin-orbit coupling. Do we have a transition or not? And the reason I'm making this joke is because DFT, well, you take the parameters from ab initio, and you are not allowed to play with them, but we did it anyhow. And what we learned is that if you have a sufficiently weak spin-orbit interaction, which is not the one for bismuthine, eventually the back gap closes and there is a phase transition. And so the question that is asked is, how large must this gap be to protect the system? And so, or on the other hand, is like this robust topological protection is actually not that robust if you treat a very strong, let's say, disorder. So, and then the quest for that, to understand this phase transition are represented by my last papers on that subject. So these are the questions. Can we understand with these phases survive strong disorder? What is the key mechanism? And can we understand this new kind of phase transition? Does it have critical exponents? What is the order parameter? Things like that. So the background is, again, this Haldane thing. And it says that you have a system which is, as a function of some external parameter, if you change this parameter and you stay in this blue region where the system is gapped, you don't make a phase transition. So it means that this is applicable to anything. Could be magnetic field, could be disorder strength, anything. So as long as you don't cross the gap, you don't cross the gap closing, you stay in the same phase. Now, if you do this, if you cross this guy, you eventually may end up in a trivial system, which is represented by gray, or if you cross twice, then you go to another topological phase. And this is a typical result of mathematics, right? They say, well, there is, I mean, it's robust, but, like there are some conditions where you are not robust, but they don't tell you which are these conditions. So this is my take on math. So there exists something, but they don't tell you what is this something. And so our work was trying to understand what is this something. And so we wrote 2 papers on that. The first one is this, with a good friend from Uberlândia, Gerson Ferreira, and Brian, who was his student. And basically, it didn't make to PRL, but it got a PRB with an L. So now they invented a new category for papers. So, and the idea is that we picked up on some old stuff called topological Anderson insulators, where basically people study the phase diagram of a system which starts as a trivial guy, and then once you crank up the disorder, it goes to a topological phase. And basically, this was understood in terms of self-consistent Born approximation. You start with the standard model for topological disorder. You put some disorder there. So topological insulator, sorry, and then you put disorder. And you make a calculation like perturbation theory or self-consistent Born or Born to vertex corrections. And then you dress. What do you do? The disorder that dressed the self-energy, and basically it changes the effective mass of your system. And by changing the effective mass, you eventually think about Haldane's phase transition, Haldane's phase diagram. You may end up in this topological Anderson phase. And so what Brian, the bright student, did was to play with that. So he was playing with disorder, and actually he reproduced the results in the literature to begin with, that we will be certain that things work out nice. And then he took a particular look on the phase transition, and using a guy which is called, it is a cousin of the Chern number. It's a local marker, is a local Chern number. And this is something we used based on some mathematics literature. And this is our indicator of topological robustness. And basically, this is our main result. So we look at this guy as a function of disorder or this effective mass. And we were able to collapse this curve depending on different parameters of the system. And we were able to extract a critical exponent for this phase transition, and eventually identify the order parameter as in this particular setting as the disorder strength, or the square root of the disorder strength. And so this was our contribution to say that although this doesn't follow the standard Landau picture of phase transition, you still can characterize this in terms of critical parameters, and this disorder topological phase transition follows most of the laws that we know from StatMech. Okay? The second paper I want to just flash here is also got this L. Was a strong fight that we lost. It was written with my colleague Marcelo Silva Neto. We have lots of interesting papers on quantum metric now. And his student, Victor Velasco, who is now in Italy, and Victor Regis, who was my student, who is now in Slovenia. And we were wondering about this disorder-driven phase transition, not Anderson, but disorder-driven. And Marcelo was very familiar with these transitions to let's say, amorphous system. And he got familiar with some people that identified some intermediate regime called Hosemann. right? So this guy studied. And the idea is that if you have a perfect system, the diffraction pattern is like that. If you have not a random system, everything will be black. If you have an amorphous system, the diffraction pattern looks like that. So you have the center, you know where the first neighbor is, perhaps the second one, and then you lose, right? And in the intermediate region, you have something which extends beyond the first neighbor. It's not you're not rotationally isotropic, so you still have some information about the lattice. But eventually, if you go to large distances, everything is gone. So this is the paracrystal, what is named by Hosemann. And so Victor was my student, very bright guy. So I told him, look, what we need is a model that you do go from here to here from the structural point of view so we can compute the electronic properties. And he found out that no model in the literature was very, very good. And until he found something, okay, I'll jump to that. Until he found a recipe in computer graphics called Perling noise. And I don't know how he found it, but basically, this Perling noise was used in different movies so that you can make a rough thing looks like smooth. So implementing this Perling noise to our system, you were able to generate, well, we start with some regular lattice, then we go to some intermediate regime, which pretty much looks like the Hosemann paracrystal. Then you have this regime, which is the amorphous regime, and eventually you go to the random gas, which you don't have even this island, you have just a point, which is the central point. And so we are equipped to model these transitions and to understand better the stability and whatever comes from that. And then there are these details. We computed this BHZ model. We computed the effective mass, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found is that there are some conditions under which you start from some parameter space and you remain topological up to the very end. It has to do with the proximity of the gamma point where we start. So I don't have time to go into that. I see my time is almost over. But basically the main message of this whole study is that we are able to do this transition from paracrystal to crystal and retain in the amorphous region this topological properties, and we understand which conditions a system has to fulfill in order to be stable, besides having a large spin-orbit interaction. Okay, so, and I don't have to go into that, but then I actually paired up with some mathematicians, and so this guy here is very good he proposed a way with Christoph Setesak, a bright student, to characterize these topological insulators in terms of invariant, which are not formulated in reciprocal space. And so in reciprocal space, we always have problems that I told you before when you have strong disorder. And if you avoid that, you might end up with an efficient way to do it. And so this is very technical. I just want to make some advertisement. So this is what we did. So there is a recipe to compute this topological indicator invariant in terms of real space. It can be implemented in let's say in DFT, if you have a DFT code like that's compute things in real space instead of reciprocal space. I don't know, it's VASP, I think does that, but I'm not an expert. And you can treat a strong disorder in this setting. So These are my conclusions. Topological phases surprise strong disorder, but not always, and we show when it doesn't, right? The Landau theory of phase transition is not applicable to topological phase transitions, right? This is known, but the scaling theory works, and there are order parameters. This we showed with Gerson. There are very many there are several real space topological indices. They have been proposed, but they are either heuristic or restricted to few symmetry classes. And what we do here is a generalization. And so with that, I'll end my talk and thank you for the audience for the attention. Okay. So this is a list of the papers on the subject over the years. You see this, it's a long list, but it spans over 6 years. And I am grateful to all these guys that helped us over the years. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Caio. Thank you very much for your very interesting paper, talk. And for me, it was a pleasure to see several friends collaborating with you, both Victor's, Marcelo Neto, etc., Leandro, of course. Now we'll pass to questions session. But before the pass for other panelists, I will have some comments. Some no, only one. The effect, the beginning of the effect starts in the edge of the system. If there is, and so this effect in the edge can do all the things in the center of this material.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So the thing is, the theory tells you that, for instance, I mean, if as condensed matter physicists, if we calculate the band structure of material, then you are focusing on, you put periodic boundary conditions and you are not really treating the edges. So you are treating just, simple system.
Mhm.
So, and then you get bands which are organized in different ways. But if you compute a certain quantity, which is called Berry curvature, then it will reveal if these bands have something special related to topology.
Mhm.
And then comes this very strong conclusion that there is a bulk edge duality. So you compute things at the bulk, but then you can predict what happens at the edges. And then you, depending on your band structure, the prediction is that you have edge states, and these edge states, they are not easily destroyed. So that's the idea. So for other people, more, like when I started this, many people told me, oh well, I'm a surface guy, surface physics person, and surface states are everywhere. But I say no, they are everywhere. But if you put disorder, they vanish. And the particular thing here is that they are robust against disorder. So surface states are very common. So that's not a question. But to survive shaking up the system is what is surprising. So in a sense, the answer to your question is it's kind of the other way around. So you have a capability of computing a band structure, and then you predict what happens at the edges of your system without putting edges. You know already what happens. So that's a kind of a take.
Okay. Another curiosity is the increasement of amortization. It can it decrease the band gap. It is
Yeah.
related with the confinement of the system that is not periodic, for instance.
Yeah, it depends. Like for most of the systems we investigated, by increasing the amorphization, the band gap decreases. And eventually, in this particular case, it had
Increase.
survival. But if I do it sorry, no, I was flashing the other way around. Sorry. If I do a ab initio calculation, let's see here. If I do an ab initio calculation, the band gap, the tendency is that I amorphize, it goes down, and then it stays. That's the point. No, it's not that it recovers. This is not very significant because we have very few samples. So to do some real thing concerning disorder systems, we have to do some averaging. And since this is a ab initio calculation, the answer is, does it close or not? But I wouldn't pay too much attention to these fluctuations. The general trend of everything we observe is that the gap tends to close. Sometimes it closes and then it becomes trivial. But most of the time, for the spin orbits interaction we chose, it stays flat at a smaller value.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. So this is what you were asking, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an ab initio one. So in some material, this should be manifest.
Thank you very much. Chimena, we have questions.
Buenos días, profesor Isaías. En este momento no tenemos preguntas de las redes y pues bueno, como este no es tanto mi tópico, no tengo preguntas al respecto.
Okay.
Aquí en las redes solamente hablan de que pues gracias por el tópico tan interesante que realizaron el día de hoy. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Si quiere me contactar, puede contactar por email y voy a responder. Isaías dice que tardo para responderlo email, pero respondo, contesto. Okay.
Tranquilo. Professora Gabriela, do you have a question?
Hello, Carlo.
Hello.
Very interesting, very interesting topic, very theoretical. A basic question, how would you propose a candidate for this kind of behavior? You choose a system where the spin-orbit coupling is big, and then you study the very phase, which you can get in some of the DFT calculations. That would be the starting point, and see and study the band gap.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is that nowadays there is an enormous number of materials that have been proposed to be topological, right? Or topological insulators. So there are many papers, theoretical papers on that, using DFT, data mining, big, all this stuff. The problem is, or let's say my take is that, on the other hand, there are very few experimental realizations so far. So this is very frustrating. We need to understand better why is that. But the focus on bismuthine that we had a number of years ago was because this has been synthesized, the pristine. And there is this science paper that tells us that, well, bismuthine is a topological insulator. And so we started from there. We said, okay, so if it is a topological insulator in the pristine phase, then we can try to see what happens when you amorphize. We didn't do a large-scale scrutiny on different materials. We were just using the materials that are around, right? So what I didn't show you guys is we had also an effort in 3D, just to, and we are not particularly creative in that. So there is a Nature Materials where people say it started. It took them a long time to be published because they started saying that is an amorphous system which shows topological behavior. And basically, Well, we contested that while this paper was a preprint, and eventually they changed the title just to say that there is a spin momentum locking, and which is a characteristic of a topological insulator, but it's not enough. And but we actually investigated also in a 3D system this bismuth selenite, and we did the same, more or less the same thing as we did for the bismuthine. We generated by molecular simulations, molecular dynamic simulations, and DFT. We studied the phase, etc., etc. So this is a PRB from 2021. So it took them 2 years to get published here in Nature Materials. And so these are, so up to last year, these were the published papers on the subject from the experimental side, right? And very few. And we are still struggling with that and trying to stimulate the experimentalists to measure. And 2D is very difficult because of the synthesis. 3D, the synthesis is more simple, but the experiments are very hard. So basically, these guys are from Berkeley, and they do all these experiments in the synchrotron there in Berkeley, and so they have access to let's say um, the band structure and the spin texture, etc., etc. of these guys. They have to identify surface states with ARPIS. So that's what is going on the experimental side. Okay, at least what I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. So it's necessary to do more calculations because at least it should be cheaper or faster, I guess. Even if there's not a proper method, no, I see.
Yeah, well, we have some proposals, but we have to convince also the experimental partners to do it. And since this is like it's a long experiment, it's an investment. You need students. You have to like make him work in that. There are many things that have to come together to that. So I think the challenge from the experimental side is larger than from the theoretical one nowadays. So it's driven by theoreticians and not by. This is a bad thing. No, normally we're driven by experimentalists, and well, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Excellent.
you, Gabriela, for your talk or question. Thank you, Caio, for your answer. And now, Henry, do you have a question?
Hi. Nice to meet you. Very nice presentation, Professor
Thank
Lewin.
you.
Even though you feel it's out of my range, I will adventure with a question related to quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know that quantum Hall effect is used in quantum computing. Can you basically extrapolate a little bit with your knowledge and explain what could be the use of the what is the range or the impact of the interquantum Hall effect into quantum computing?
Well, this is yeah. So what people use in I'm not an expert, and I take the risk. I'll give a short answer because I'm at YouTube, so later on I can speculate more. So what people do in quantum computing using quantum Hall effect is to explore what we call topological states, and basically the 5 halves that have a very particular structure. And this has become one of the proposals. But this is a very different regime than the integer one. This is the fractional one. And there, by interchanging the position of the anyons, you might have a recipe to do your computation. And here in the integer quantum Hall effect, all these effects are just absent. It's topological just because of the chiral nature. And I don't know of an application of the integer quantum Hall in quantum computing, I'm afraid. But I can look into that, but I just don't know. So I know that there are many papers, many friends of mine that are working in the fractional quantum Hall effect as a proposal for quantum computing. This is there, and there it's a more convoluted thing, and you have to construct the qubits, and you have to manipulate them, and all that is very beyond the scope of this particular discussion we are having here. So that's my short answer.
Thank you for the answer. And very nice presentation again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. I think there is no more question of the panelists. And so, Caio, you can turn off your transparency.
Yeah.
The people, if possible, open your webcam to. Okay. Caio, now we'll give opportunity to your final words and.
Okay. So basically, what I want to say is that well, first I have to thank you guys for attending. It's very nice to have this diverse audience, and this is only possible due to internet, and I like this opportunities. Now, what I can briefly end up saying that where we are heading with Marcelo in particular is that we are exploring some other features of topology called geometric tensor and geometric metric, quantum metric, sorry, and this is also related to transport. And I invite you to have a look. And we have already a paper out, and we're producing that. And I think this is a challenge to understand a deeper connection again between the band structure properties of your system and some very peculiar responses to magnetic and electric fields. And so this is where we are centering our effort. And the second thing, which I didn't discuss, which is a real challenge, is all I talked about was single particle scenario, and the most I did leaving that was mean field, which is also single particle. And the real challenge is to understand what all these topological properties are in strongly interaction systems, and how you characterize and how you make the bridge between this beautiful math that we are using and the systems which are strongly interacting. This construction is far from being finished, and I invite everybody to think about that. This is a real important question that is left and is open around. So this is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Caio. After acknowledge again the speaker, I would like that know if Luis Valadares want to speak something.
Yes. Thank you very much, Caio, for your nice talk. Muito obrigado por su palestra. Eu quiero anunciar también al público que nos sigue que hay un nuevo miembro de la red, LAFMAT, que es de la Universidad de Nuevo León en México, que es el profesor, si puede mostrar su cámara. Alfredo, ¿estás? Alfredo Tlahuize, ¿no? Se va a integrar a partir de ahora, como se está integrando como nuevo miembro de la red LAFMAT. ¿Ok? Bienvenido, Alfredo. Ok, muy obrigado. Entonces, creo que nos despedimos. Muchas gracias nuevamente, Caio. y nos despedimos hasta la siguiente semana que tenemos otra reunión a estas mismas horas. Ok, gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Talk hands.